Good morning, Clearwater, Pinellas, Zephyr Hills, the greater Tampa Bay area. Welcome to Dispatch Radio. This is Brandon Jones, and with me, as always, the co-host, the managing editor of theglobaldispatch.com, Robert Harriman. How are you this morning, Bob?
Good morning, Mr. Brandon, and how are you doing?
Oh, very, very blessed. Let me tell you what, we have an action-packed show today. We have 4 guests. We have stuff lined up back to back to back. We're going to do the show completely different this morning. So please check out theglobaldispatch.com. You can follow along with some of the news stories that we're going to be covering this morning. And we're going to get right to it. We have a special guest this morning. We're going to start off with the senior video producer for the Media Research Center. You might know the MRC TV and some of the great videos that they produce. And he's the owner and proprietor of blackandright.com. We have Bob Parks. Bob, you with us?
I'm with you. How you doing, Brandon and Bob?
We are so blessed. Bob, we're so happy you're with us. We're going to run through some different news and political stories that are going on and some of the work that you guys have been doing. So let's get right to Detroit. They made a lot of headlines early in the week. It's gone from the 4th biggest city in our country to $20 billion in debt and bankruptcy. And Bob, I mean, I don't think you were really surprised by this, but you had an interesting perspective when we were talking about this.
Well, I can only go back and remember the video of a city council meeting in Detroit with Monica Conyers where she called the president of the council Shrek, and you just watch the dysfunction and the breakdown of civility and just they're being adults. And these are the people who are running up, I believe they were running up $10 million or $10 billion I think it was $10 million a year deficits for like over a decade, and you wonder why this city is mismanaged and broke with the contracts they put out. It was obvious that some of these people were basically just self-serving, and they had no foresight as to the damage fiscally they were doing to that city. So now all of a sudden it all falls apart, and we're even entertaining the thought of giving them a bailout.
Yeah, you had an interesting perspective on that because obviously Detroit is the biggest city that we've seen with the bankruptcy thing. But you were absolutely right. When we were prepping for the show, you were talking about how if we bail out Detroit, I mean, what city's next, right?
Well, it'd be, of course, we know Stockton, California, which was, I believe, the biggest municipality up until this point. But yeah, a precedent will be set, and every city that has been fiscally mismanaged, and I think we are not talking about a few dozen, we are talking about possibly hundreds of cities of all sizes that have made deals with the devil as far as the outrageous salaries of law enforcement, of EMTs, of teachers. Whenever these cities and towns wanted to, or these unions for these employees wanted a pay raise, they would threaten a strike. And of course, we can't let the teachers go on strike. We can't let the people who are firefighters or our ambulance employees, we can't let any of them go on strike. So what do? They always socked it to the taxpayer, and they put it. And if the taxpayers couldn't, give them the revenues that they needed, they just went into deficit spending. I think this is something we would see hundreds of cities and towns across this country. Once the trigger is pulled on Detroit, all these other cities will come out with their hands out, demanding that they get what Detroit got. And it sounds cold-blooded, but sometimes you need to let, as I've said many times in the past, you need to let people sit in the dumpster water until they get their minds right.
So I guess you disagree with Ed Schultz that this is not a conservative utopia after all, right?
Ed Schultz, yeah.
Ed Schultz, yeah. Yeah, it was crazy to talk about that. Yeah, it's it really is just kind of mind-blowing because we're talking about a city, and if you haven't seen this, folks, you can go to theglobaldispatch.com. You can see some of the different things. There's tons of links. Bob has covered this extensively on his site, blackandright.com, and you can see they've had warnings. The police are not going to come. Enter at your own risk. I mean, how do you let a city of this magnitude get so bad? Well, exactly as he said. It's over years and years and years of these extreme policies.
I was talking with my son about this the other day. I can't remember if there was some major sporting event, and I don't know if it was an all-star game or what, but they were telling these fans who are going to be coming from out of town to come to this national event that was happening at the new Detroit Stadium, and they were telling the people, all these tourists and visitors, not to stray too far from your hotels or from the stadium because you could get killed. Now, I'm sorry, that's not really the kind of slogan you want to put out if you work in a tourism department. But that's just the sign of the times in Detroit. It's very unfortunate, but again, if you bail them out, they won't learn the lesson, and you're going to have every small city up to medium-sized, if not, I mean, half of California would have their hands out demanding they got what Detroit got.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's shift gears. We're definitely going to be watching this. We'll see how the Obama administration and the White House continues to press for that bailout. I think we all feel confident that something along that lines will probably be at least brought to the table for people to vote on. And we'll have to continue to be good stewards and put pressure on our representatives to vote against that. Now, let me shift gears to an interesting vote. I wanted to get your take on this, too. The NSA surveillance program has made a lot of headlines, and the House had put forth a bill that was written by Justin Amash that had to do with cutting funding for this NSA, this broad NSA surveillance program. And there's an interesting argument that was made by Michelle Bachmann, and she didn't vote for it as well. So the bill did fail. So the NSA program is pretty much how it has been. But I wanted your take, Bob, on if you haven't seen Michelle Bachmann's a quote, I can read some of that to you. But I wanted your thoughts on the NSA surveillance program, and then what your thoughts were of if you think any changes need to be done to it. What do you think is good and bad?
Well, I think over the last few years, I mean, and it's not just an affliction of the Obama administration, and of course there will be people who will go back to Bush, will go back as far as Bill Clinton with Project Echelon. We know that the government is going to do what it deems necessary to protect the American people. That being said, we are also dealing with human beings who are flawed, who have sometimes delusions of grandeur, that they think that they are above the rules, that a lot of the things that they impose on us, just look at Obamacare, that they impose on us, they will exempt themselves from. When I think of these people who are voting to keep the surveillance going, I think that they probably feel they're doing good for the country, and at the same time, because of the positions that they hold, some of them are on the intelligence committees, that they are exempt. So this is not going to hurt them. And I think a lot of us, and it's just sort of human nature, that we will do mean things to other people as long as we feel fairly protected, and in some cases immune from what is happening to somebody else.
You know, it's interesting because you're presenting a different angle than I even thought of. And what Michelle Bachmann's argument was that there's folks that are creating like a false narrative. In other words, we're fear mongers because we're talking about that they're collecting all this data, and she's just saying that's not happening.
Well, again, she's privy to information on the intelligence committee that she is on, so she knows what is being surveilled, what is being gathered, and she even made reference, I believe, to that they're not collecting the phone book, or she made some reference to a phone book. And I'm sorry, when was the last time any of us used the phone book for its original purpose? I use phone books to stand on. I bash things with them. So the whole notion that they are gathering, that they have created all these huge facilities to gather information and they're not doing anything with it, I'm sorry. They are gathering this information, and we have seen numerous stories, especially during the last presidential campaign, if I may just bring a couple of things to mind, where bits and pieces of Mitt Romney's personal information were threatened to be put out. How did Harry Reid, for example, know that there was some information about Mitt Romney's tax returns, which are supposed to be private. He threatened that somebody was going to leak this information. And we never found out who that person was.
I'm not sure anybody even asked him.
We're constantly hearing stories about people and bits and pieces of information that are going to be let loose on the public. And also, who's now aligned with this White House at the hip? Eric Schmidt and Google? I mean, now all the major web companies are now, we've been finding out over the last few weeks that they have made these deals and they are working with the government, when at one point they told us, oh no, we're shocked, we didn't even know this was happening. Then we find out they made deals and they are now actively working, because I'm sure they really have a choice.
Yeah.
When you have the weight of the government over you, we know that this the law enforcement wing of this administration they don't really go by the law, and they sort of ignore laws that are inconvenient to them, enforce the ones that they want, and in fact, they will even use the IRS to go after people. So I don't trust any of these people. And as far as Michelle Bachmann goes, and I got people mad at me a long time ago when I made her one of my boneheads of the day, because she decided to co-opt the Tea Party and create the Tea Party caucus, just so she could mobilize that base and supposedly speak for us on Capitol Hill right around the time she was trying to put her presidential campaign together. I don't trust Michelle Bachmann. I'm sure she's a nice person. I was in an office with her when we were doing an interview with her. She seems like a very nice person. Do I trust her? No.
Yeah, and I think it's we'll leave it with this. I would love for anyone to ask Michelle Bachmann if what her statements are true, then what is being stored in this giant Utah information data center? What's there then? If they're not doing what people like I are alleging that they are, and what Google and Facebook say they're doing, then what on earth are we doing in Utah? So, Bob, let me shift gears. You actually, you guys do a great work over at MRC TV. If you guys have not been there, go to the YouTube page. They have MRC TV. You can see these videos. They are fantastic. And they go out and they ask interesting questions to folks. They really have, in my opinion, they are key to unearthing what has now become nicknamed the low information voters. And there's a brand new one that Bob had just sent me. It is you've gone out to a college campus and you've asked a very challenging abortion question. And Bob, you can tell us, what was that question and what was the response that your folks saw?
Well, our reporter, Dan Joseph, came up to me on, I believe it was Wednesday, and he had this idea for a petition video. And he wanted to ask students if they thought that we should legalize fourth trimester abortions, because we should not tell a woman what to do with her body, and if after the fourth trimester she decides she doesn't want to have the baby, she should be able to abort it. The problem with that is, in the word trimester, tri implies 3. So there's 3 blocks of time that we have deemed a baby to be viable. After the 3rd trimester, the baby is viable, should not be aborted. Texas has passed a law saying as much. So the whole notion of the 4th trimester was basically a joke. But the problem is the students, and I also asked Dan, why are we still picking on George Mason University? Because the last few videos we did it. He did at George Mason, and I think it's just a question of local convenience for us. So here he is on the campus of George Mason asking these students, and I believe over the course of an hour he asked I think it was maybe 19 students, and 16 of them voted to or signed the petition to legalize 4th trimester abortions.
It just goes to show we can pretty much get a petition or people to sign a petition on just about anything, can we not?
Well, it's that, but it's also the fact that, and I can appreciate with the audience that I'm blessed or that reads my columns and goes to my websites and then engage with them on Facebook, that they sort of keep up with what's going on in the world. But what we've been finding more and more from our visits and our intrusions to the people at least at George Mason University, that basic knowledge are things that even in an institution of higher learning is something that is unfortunately sorely lacking. We did a petition video there where we asked people if they knew who Edward Snowden was. A lot of them didn't. They didn't know who the Attorney General of the United States was, but they knew that Kim Kardashian just recently had a baby. So that, I think, is probably one of the, and I don't like to use the word scary. A lot of people say, oh, I'm terrified, this is scary. But these are the people who bought what politicians tell them blindly. Things like Obamacare is not going to add one dime to the deficit. Or things like the Benghazi attack was the result of a response to a YouTube video. These are people who, as Rush Limbaugh termed or coined the phrase, the low information voter, these are the people who have brought this country to the point we are at now.
And, you know, it's funny.
Where we have all these things hanging over our heads, like Obamacare, all these different phony scandals that are out there. They are the ones who have made this possible, not Barack Obama. I don't blame Barack Obama. Barack Obama is a politician. He's going to do what we expected a far-left liberal to do. The problem is he's there because of a bunch of uninformed, blissfully ignorant people who think they know everything. It's a dangerous combination.
And we ran into that ourselves personally. We ran into someone this week who didn't even know what Benghazi was. They didn't know. They'd come to us. They were starting up a conversation about why President Obama's approval ratings were falling so drastically. Well, we have to kind of wrap up there. Bob Parks, I tell you what, it's been such a pleasure. We're going to have you on again, go through some of these great headlines and different things, and the work that you do over at MRC TV, blackandright.com. Check out these sources. Check out this website. Follow this great stuff that Bob does. He has a great thing. He does most mornings. He gets up. He does what's called a skim for the day, where he's giving you all the different stuff that you can follow along with the headlines, the stories, and that kind of thing. And it keeps you posted on all that's going on in the news. Bob, take care of yourself, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, friend. Talk to you soon.
All right.